Yep. My name's Robby Magyar. My degree is Bachelor of Arts. I'm in my third year, technically. My slogan is Rocket Robby, as in rock, not as in a rocket. Have to make that clear. And I'm running on teal.
Great. Okay, there is a massive field of candidates this year. What makes you distinct from the other 15?
Yep. I've been involved in the USU for the last 3 years, quite heavily. Clubs and societies, running O Week, starting 2 clubs. I feel like out of the candidates, they all have amazing experiences in various different fields. I feel like my experiences are more targeted towards the USU than other candidates. And I feel like I would be one of the better candidates to transition into a board director because of that experience.
In saying that, what other candidates do you feel like you identify the most with?
Yep. I'd first off the bat have to say Eve. I've worked with Eve recently on O Week. She was the women's convener for the USU, and together we set up an event to revamp the women's room. And she's a hard worker and has a lot of similar interests to me with the USU. Another candidate that I would have to say I agree a lot with and have a lot of, can bounce a lot off from is Tara. She and I have been friends for quite some time and both involved in the UN Society and have worked together in that field as well. So I feel like they would be the two that I would also say would be good board directors.
What do you think about the current state of the union?
Yep. I think the USU is in a really good place in comparison to where it's been previously. I feel like financially we are more sound than we were. However, that is on rocky ground, especially when you consider the SAF. It may not exist at the end of the year if the government changes. So I think whilst we are in a good position and things like O Week have been the biggest and best and more events selling out and that sort of stuff, I think we always need to look to the future because that financial situation may not always be as secure as it is at this moment.
What do you think is the legacy that the union should carry on despite their money issues and things like that?
Yeah. It should always carry the focus of being the premier student experience creator. So whether that's creating, positive playtime experiences like O Week or creating, degree relevant activities like debates, it needs to always be there as the counterpoint to a degree, because otherwise its function is kind of mute.
Do you think, you mentioned SAF and that tends to dry up, maybe including that, what do you think is the biggest challenge that the union currently faces?
Yep. I think relevance with members would be, with students in general would be one of its biggest challenges. I know this year access card sales did increase, and that's great, but with the SAF and with the financial issues come a lack of interest in getting involved and paying an extra fee because of something like the SAF. So it's, trying to get the message out there that USU is still important and still needed.
Do you think universal access is something you might push for on the board?
I definitely agree with something like a universal access. I'm not running on it because I think to do so it's lacking an understanding of how universal access will come into play. It is something that the board is considering, and I think it should be considered because it's an important step to making sure low SES students and students from non-privileged backgrounds get into the USU and don't have to worry about the financial side of things. But it needs to be done at a time when the USU is financially stable and able to do that without fear of being taken over by the university.
So now to your policies.
Yep.
I guess you said that you weren't running on universal access, but you are running on rewards with your access card. So what kind of rewards would they be, and how would the union go about funding those kind of rewards?
Yep. So the idea that, such as USU Miles that I came up with, my stepmom is a firm believer in flyby cards. I don't understand them. I've never had one, but I think it's a good idea to have something in place where students not only get their discounts on campus, but are able to accrue points, so to speak. So the idea, the way that it would work basically is sort of like flybys, except you don't get flights out of it. So say you spend $50 on campus, that accrues to maybe 50 points. You get a free coffee. Then $200 after using your access card, you might get like a 20% off voucher in an outlet. How it would work, I'm not too sure because I haven't I'm not elected. I'm running to be elected. How it would be funded, not entirely sure. I would say it would be one of those discussions that I would have to have with people like the CEO and with the board. I can't make a decision on, where such a program would start.
Another quite specific policy of yours was to have frozen yogurt in my life.
Yes.
There's already, I think it's 4 frozen yogurt places in Newtown now.
Yep. 3
or 4. There's one about 10 minutes walk from Wentworth.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think students really need another one so close to home?
Yep. So I actually work in one of the frozen yogurt places on King Street, and having worked there for the last few months, business is booming. FroYo is a very popular, and trendy kind of food item at the moment, and there's never been a struggle to worry about, getting interest in such a product. Yes, it's just on King Street, but so is Thai, and similar, in previous years, candidates have run on the promise of bringing Thai on campus. I think FroYo is a more realistic, kind of thing to bring on campus. It's healthy, it's fun, it's also, really tasty. And, from a fun kind of perspective, yes, you can walk down to King Street, but on a hot day, if you want to think of FroYo, do you really want to walk all the way down to King Street when you could just walk to Wentworth?
So another one of your policies is the recording of student performers in the Holme building.
Yeah.
So how would you make that function, I guess?
Yep. So again, a lot of my policies have been based on my experience being an O-Week director. We set up a band competition during O-Week, and every single entrant was fantastic, and they all had the ability to be recorded, but they didn't have the ability to fund that. They didn't have the access to a recording studio because they're often quite expensive. They're often going to those who have already kind of proven themselves in a very competitive market. The way that I would see it working is basically just getting people who have entered the band competitions on campus with the USU, and getting them in that room and getting them to play and recording it and then putting it on a mixtape, even making it available online. It's the idea of they get a chance to actually have recording time and getting their music out there.
Can I just ask you specific on that? Are you talking about which room? Is it the SURG room or?
Yes, the SURG radio room.
I think it's correct that equipment actually belongs to the Media Communications Department,
Yep.
not to the union.
Mm-hmm.
And from what I understand, they've worked quite hard to control that space and work with the union. Why do you think the Media Communications Department would let the union use its equipment for something that doesn't really serve its mission at all?
I think it would actually serve its mission. A lot of the students who use that room are also part of SURG and also are very interested in music and interested in, musicology and talking about what music matters and reporting on music. I think it's just another function that could be looked at and quite useful for both the students in the Media and Communications Department as well as students who are performance-based.
I mean, the actual Media Communications Department, their job is to do journalism-related things, produce radio shows, and that's why they would want those resources used, I would presume. Do you think you'll be able to, so you seem confident you'll be able to negotiate with them to let the union take over those that material for certain periods of time for their own ends?
Obviously, it's one of those discussions that I would need to have with the Media and Communications Department, and I haven't had that conversation yet. However, I feel like it's not too much of a stretch to say, hey, can we borrow your equipment? Hey, would we be able to work with you on this and get your students being able to report on these students who are performing in your space?
Cool. So another one of your policies was to have a weekly Mexican night at Hermanns, which sounds pretty fun.
Yeah.
Another logistical issue is the fact that Hermanns doesn't really have a kitchen or any of those facilities to make that properly happen. So what is your plan for that policy if it was to go ahead?
Yep, I would see it working in a similar function to the Manning Tiki Bar. So it would be a pop-up structure that effectively sets up sort of like a hot dog stand. And serves burritos and cerveza from that stand. It would be pretty easy to set up. It's a similar system that's used in Manning for their tiki DJs.
Another one of your policies is on, and quite a few listed on your brochure. Another one is on internships in the USU. We're just wondering what kind of internships these would be, what kind of jobs students would be doing, and also whether you imagine them as paid or unpaid internships.
Yep. So I'm an arts student, and getting an internship is notoriously hard for arts students. You have to compete against media and communications, law, business, marketing. The way that I see it is working as it being setting up internships within the USU at first that are open to all students. And it would effectively be like a week in shadowing someone from the marketing department or maybe operations, depending on what the student is interested in, what is actually feasible. It'd be great to say, yeah, we'll pay the students. But the idea behind an internship is unpaid work experience. And I think that would be the easiest way to set something up like that, where students can actually gain an internship where they otherwise might not.
We, there are a number of things that we can hold the university accountable to, but one thing that it does really well is its career centre. It has a really great website that functions really well. It's really easy to find specific part-time jobs and things like that, and one big thing is finding internships. So do you think that it's necessary for the union to put, to have its own program when the university already kind of does this really well?
So the difference between the two would be these are internships based within the USU. From my knowledge, there are no internships offered within the USU, within the marketing department. And the way that I would envision such a thing working would be that it's not closed off. When you apply on the Careers Centre for internships and jobs, you do a quiz beforehand that is tailored to find out, what sort of jobs and internships would be available for someone within your degree. I would see it as being separate to that. There's no reason why someone from engineering or even agriculture can't, have an interest in marketing as well.
Are you worried that, if they were unpaid internships, that maybe the USU or certain parts of the USU would have a tendency to offload work, which it could be doing just on students without pay, and it may not be so beneficial for those students, on top of the fact that it's going to take up a lot of time and effort and tracking the studies. The usual problems that some students do find with unpaid internships?
Yeah, that's definitely a concern, and that's definitely something that would have to be considered before anything like this ever got put into place. But it's one of those things that with consultation between students and between staff, I'm sure we can find a happy medium where students are given, adequate, roles that aren't too demanding to the point that they're actually doing the work of someone who's actually getting paid.
Cool. So, in general, how would you describe your political philosophy?
Yeah. I consider myself a progressive in the sense that, I'm queer identifying, I believe in gay marriage, I believe in, gender parity on board, I believe in equality amongst all people. In this election, I don't feel like politics are necessarily that important in the sense that they should not be the decisive factor of how successful a person can be as a board director. Yeah.
Are you aligned to any political factions on campus?
I'm a member of the ALP club. I've been a member for a couple of years. I'm not an active member. I have friends who are active members, but I have been involved in other various groups on campus in the past. It just happens that the majority of my friends happen to be in the ALP club.
Well, I wanted to ask you about that. So, as we understand it, Unity, which is the Labour Right faction here on campus, has endorsed you as their candidate, and some of their senior members will be helping you run. Last year, when you were interested in running for board, as we understand, you approached NLS, the Labour Left faction, and this year you've approached Labour Right. Do you think, is that indicative of you becoming more conservative since last year, or was there a pragmatic reason for that move?
So last year, I really wanted to run for board. I had a conversation with a past board director who effectively said to me, this is the year, last year, I'm talking about, this is the year that you need to run. You cannot run in any subsequent year. It's your time now. And so I had this panic mode of, I'd always been interested in the board and the way that the USU functions, and I wanted to run. And so it was that moment that I was blindsided by that desire that I would have gone anywhere for support. I've since matured, and I'm quite glad that I didn't run last year because I would not have had the same understanding of the USU that I've come to now. Yes, I am being supported by people in Unity. I'm also being supported by people who are Liberal voters. I'm also being supported by people from TSOC, Darcy Soc, SURGs. I'm not endorsed by anyone, but I'm supported by many. Yeah.
Do you think that kind of makes your politics and your policies and that kind of thing a little bit all over the place instead of just being a singular kind of specific line of politics. You kind of have a few liberals, but you say you are quite progressive as well. I think a lot of progressive candidates probably wouldn't want liberal support. How would you feel about that?
Yep. I would basically take support from wherever it comes, in the sense that I'm friends with people who are liberals, and I don't hold that against them. Their political views may not be my own, but in this election, I feel like their involvement, their desire to see me get elected, is indicative of the person that I am, not necessarily my politics. Yes, I'm being supported by numerous different people, but from different political backgrounds, but I don't feel like that is a judgment on, or should be used to judge me or my policies.
So do you support, you kind of inferred before, but let's get clear, do you support the current AA provisions?
Yes, I support them in their current form. The one thing I don't support is the language that is used around AA, this whole logic of it being about equality. It creates a problematic, or I feel it creates a problematic perception of what AA is. I think it should turn to a language that's more about gender parity, simply because in a board structure like what we are dealing with this year, where 3 men get elected and 3 women get elected, I see it more about being a parity issue than about equality.
Well, it may not be. It may be 4 or 5 women get elected.
Yeah, exactly. There's 6 women running and all 6 could get elected. It would also be, quite representative of the student body, because more women attend university than men.
So you wouldn't look to change that provision in the future?
No.
So I guess one of the things that you would have to deal with if you were to be elected on board is voting for the higher positions within the board.
Yep.
Have you put any thought into who you would vote for president?
Yep. So at this stage, my biggest concern is me getting elected. That is what I am focusing on wholeheartedly. But when it comes to president, I would have to admit that I'm voting for John Harding-Eason. He's a really good friend of mine, has been for quite some time. I was involved in his campaign, and I see him being the best person to lead the USU.
Do you think the fact, for the sake of recording, John is obviously Unity's current member on board, and Unity are obviously going to give you some help, quite a bit of help, among other people, in your bid to be elected. Do you think that maybe that's a bit of a blinder for you, that other candidates we've talked to have said, well, I'm going to look at all everyone who's there when I get there, I'm going to judge them on their competence, on their skill, on their ethics, and you may know John quite well now, but do you think that maybe running with Unity has blinded you a bit to other people who might be running for president later this year?
Definitely not. If it came to my attention that another presidential candidate would be more suited to being president, then I would switch my vote. Similar circumstances happened last year with the election, where friendship didn't come into play in the way that it might come into play this year. Yes, I'm being supported by people from Unity, but that number is around 20 people, and so I don't feel like my decision is based on any binding agreement with Unity.
So you haven't had to sign any agreements or anything like that in terms of...
No. So at this stage, whilst I am likely to vote for John, if there is another candidate for president who I think is better, then my vote could definitely sway.
I think I'll just take you back to a couple of issues we've talked about with a few of the other people we chatted to today.
Yep.
The first issue is that of transparency with the board. When would you support in-camera meetings? In what circumstances do you think the board should have in-camera meetings?
Yep. I definitely think it is applicable to have in-camera meetings when you're dealing with internal board matters, such as board conflict. That has been a recent issue that's popped up in a lot of board meetings, where they've had to have those meetings both before and after to ensure board cohesiveness. I also feel that when it's dealing with issues to do with staff, that's a very contentious issue, because we're dealing with paid staff, and there's a reason why there is a requirement for no Twitter feeds to mention staff. I think they are the two circumstances that I would be in favour of in camera, but otherwise I believe in board transparency, and it's one of those things that I've gone to board meetings. I'm in a lucky position where I can go to board meetings, but not everyone can. That shouldn't stop members from having access to the same information that I get.
On the issue of staff, as you said, members who go to board meetings are allowed to tweet the names of staff. But staff play quite an important role in the union in drafting policy and giving feedback and all those sorts of things. What do you think the role of the CEO is?
Yep. The CEO in my eyes, is basically to oversee the staff within the USU, not the board. So the board acts to oversee what he does. He oversees everyone else. I feel like it's a really good structure. The CEO has to deal with, the operations department, the marketing department, the programs department, which are large departments that have numerous staff. His role is quite integral to managing those relationships and managing conflicts and hiring and firing and that sort of stuff.
So we've been obviously looking at the different CVs of the candidates that have been coming in. Some of them have absolutely nothing on their CVs, but that you have the biggest one out of all 17. And it's quite impressive. But it is also, is it fair to say that some of the things you've done were in preparation for this run?
I can definitely see why people think that, but no. Every single position that I have held or currently hold has been a position that I've wanted to be in, regardless of running for board or not. My decision to run for board was not made until day 2 of O Week officially. That is when I decided that I was officially going to run for board. I was actually in the quad at the Mad Hatter Tea Party, and I was like, yeah, I fucking love this place, I'm running. Before that, I had definitely considered it and I really wanted to, but the concrete decision to run this year and to put my full force into it was only made in March.
I mean, as you said, last year you were thinking about it. It's obviously been something you would have had a lot of time to plan for, and if you wanted to beef up your CV, just not of that, it would have been quite an open possibility.
And I can see where people have done that in the past and where people might see that with me. A lot of my experience, especially under the university title, was before I even got involved in the USU, and a lot of it was from 2011 when I had only just started to get involved in the USU.
I might just ask one more question, which is about your time before union involvement. I think it was when you were the history rep for the student rep for the history department. You sent an email out to students asking them to vote for a certain Senate candidate for the elections that were going on there. I believe that's correct?
No, it was actually for myself for a faculty election.
Okay, sorry.
And looking back on that, that decision was very unprofessional and I should not have done that. And I do regret it. It's one of those things that back then I was very immature in how I saw that position and where I saw my responsibilities lying. That would not be something that I would do in this current candidacy. I